The apostolic movement is amazing, and it's very inspiring. We must never forget the sacrifices that were made by the pioneers of yesteryear. So, in this week's devotional, I am going to share with you some things that happened in a revival with my father's ministry many years ago when I was quite young. There was a particular point in Dad's life when he was not pastoring. He was just preaching meetings in certain places. But he felt a great burden and a great desire to pastor again. And there was a church in central Louisiana that invited him to become their pastor. At that particular time, there were 5 children in our family. And that church that invited Dad to come and become their pastor was a self-supporting church for the pastor. But Dad didn't quite feel comfortable with that. He didn't feel that that was where God was leading him. And it was about that time that he got a call from another church. It was in southeast Louisiana, not far from the Texas border. The difference between this church and the first one that invited him, this particular church only had 3 members, 1 man and 2 ladies. I don't know, but what maybe a few others would come on certain occasions, but that's all there was to the membership of the church. But Dad said that God gave him a deep burden for that church, and that's where our family moved. We moved into a little house out behind the church, and it was hard times. I can vaguely remember some of the issues of our life as a family living in that little remote community in southeast Louisiana. We'd been living there a few months until one night my father was awakened because the house was on fire. And we got out with all of our family. We lost everything, but it was a terrible tragedy. But Dad still felt like God had sent him to that community, and he was determined to build a church there. And so he began having prayer meetings with this little handful of people in the congregation. One particular Sunday, Dad said, "We are going to have prayer meeting every night this week, and our goal is to pray for revival." And so that's exactly what happened. We went into the church and we prayed. I don't remember which particular night it was, but we were in the church praying, and there was a knock on the church door. And that was a strange thing. If you're going to knock on a door, it would be somebody's home. But on this occasion, someone knocked on the church door. I suppose they did so because the light showed that there was someone there. My dad got up from the altar and went to the door, and when he opened the door, there stood a man that my dad knew very well from the state of Illinois. That man's name was Brother Overton. He was an evangelist. And Dad looked at him for a moment, and that man looked at Dad. And the first words out of that man's mouth were these. He said, "Brother Young, what are you doing here?" And Dad responded and said, "Well, that's what I was about to ask you. What are you doing here?" Because that little community was on a gravel road 13 miles from the closest city or closest town, and no one passed through Fields, Louisiana. If anybody was there, they went there on purpose. Brother Overton said, "Well, Brother Young, I closed a revival last night in East Texas, and I'm on my way to Mississippi to preach another revival." He said, "But I got lost, and I found myself here, and I was driving along, and I saw this. I didn't know whether it was a church or not, but I felt like it was. I didn't see any cars, but I saw lights on. And so I decided I would stop and ask directions to the next little town. And Dad said, well, Brother Overton, we are in this church tonight praying for revival. Why don't you and Sister Overton come in and let your wife sing for us, and you give us a little devotional here tonight? Brother Overton said, I'll be glad to do that. So he got his wife's accordion out of the car. They both came into the church. She sang several songs and played her accordion. And then Brother Overton spoke to that little handful of people. And when it was all over, people gathered around him and said, Brother Overton, you can't leave. God sent you here. Why don't you start us a revival? And Brother Overton said, well, Brother Young, I'm on my way to Mississippi, and I am committed to start a revival there tomorrow night. So he said, the only way I can stay is if that pastor in Mississippi is willing. And Dad said, well, you can spend the night with us, and then you can drive into DeQuincy, and you can call him tomorrow. And that's exactly what happened. And that pastor said, well, absolutely, Brother Overton. If God meant for you to be there, that's where you need to be. When it's over, let me know, and we'll start the revival. Now, here's the rest of the story. The first night or so of Brother Overton's revival at Fields was, it just had the people who were members of the church. But word spread. There had not been a revival in that community for many years. And when the word spread that there's an evangelist at that church, and they are having good services, and that evangelist's wife is a phenomenal singer, people began to come to the revival. And before we knew it, that little building was absolutely packed with people. It was so packed that Dad and some of the men of the community moved all of the benches. They were not pews, they were benches. Moved all of those out of the sanctuary on the outside. And Dad strung up lights on the outside. And great numbers of people came to the revival from the community. Some of the men would not join with us in the meeting, but they would sit in their vehicles with their windows down and listen. I don't remember how many people received the Holy Ghost in that revival, but it was a great number of people. And it was not too long after that revival closed until we reached a peak of 144 people on Sunday morning for Sunday school. But before it was all over with, our peak attendance was 200 and something, all because of a revival that was in that community. I'm sharing this story with you today because sometimes we find ourselves in a place where we kind of feel discouraged and we feel like we don't have a good opportunity and we're not accomplishing much. But don't ever forget that God knows who you are. He knows where you are. He knows exactly what you're going through. And if you'll be faithful to Him, revival will come. There is a great church in Fields, Louisiana right now, all because that little band of people went to the house of God and poured out their heart and asked God to give them revival. I hope you will remember this little story because no doubt there are things in your life that will give you great inspiration as you look at tomorrow. God bless you is my prayer.